So now the recording is on.
Okay.
Okay, but then, yeah, then welcome, Tom.
Thank you. Okay, welcome everybody. And the course is being recorded. If you wish to refresh it, share it with somebody else, or catch up on a later episode you couldn't meet. The documentation is primarily this book I wrote this summer, which corresponds to the theory I want to transmit. And today is sort of introductory day where I'll give an overview of what's going to happen in more detail. If you want the book, you could scan this QR, or you could use this link here, tiny URL sys ent arc book at any time, and get the text I'm using. So I think that is also possibly announced in the invitation, but that's the textbook. I've been teaching this stuff for years to enterprise architects in several countries, but this summer I heard some lectures by an enterprise architect who was also a guested OSWA and several other places. And I was disappointed that he didn't have a focus on the values that architects should provide. So almost in anger, I wrote this book and I sent him a copy. This is an entirely different view of enterprise architecture from the conventional TOGAF, Zachman, and that kind of thing. So I just for fun, I had a nice little C here, and I decided to call it Systems Enterprise Architecture. So I want to emphasize that it's about architecture, whatever that means, and I can define it. It's about enterprise architecture, in other words, for organizations, but it's systems is there to emphasize that it's much more than IT or software or hardware. It's about absolutely the whole system, that is, in particular, the culture, the people, the motivation, and anything that will deliver the values that the organization wants. Another interpretation of SEA could be systems engineering architecture. In other words, not just nice drawings and diagrams, but numbers and logic and things like that. So it says here, based on, and then there are a number of buzzwords here, but engineering, values, and value agile. This is very definitely something that is a very advanced agile method, but it's value agile. That is, the emphasis is not on speed of delivery of user stories or something like that. The emphasis is on delivery of value to the stakeholders. Let's see, I see that I haven't given my my own email. I'll do that orally. I really should put it in there. But let's see, upgrade, oh dear. Okay, I don't want to get into that. But tom@gilb.com will get you direct access if you have questions after the or between intervals. I'm going to lecture more or less for an hour. I've set an alarm at 5 o'clock, and then we have about a half an hour for questions, but the formal lecturing will be done no matter what by 5 o'clock every day, if you just want to do an hour. If somebody urgently needs to ask a question in the middle, okay, but it'd be best to put it off until later. And do we have a question and answer area here? I can't see it right away, but we'll get to that. We'll do them orally anyway. Okay, here then is our syllabus, in a book outline, chapter by chapter. So I'm going to basically do this coming Thursday, and then this next Tuesday, etc. We may or may not do the additional stuff here. We haven't quite planned for it. Let's see how things work out, but worst case, you have them in the book. This is like more details and things like that. So let's see. Yeah, this is my rationale for writing the book. I've got some funny little things: annotate and clear all drawings. Okay, yeah, there's a new annotation thing here I haven't seen before. Okay, annotate, right. Now, for example, one of my motivations is tired of seeing these various architecture certifications. They are the same. Actually, I'm going to close the door to outside noise. There's an analogy, it's selling all the certifications for Agile. And I'm very much against that. I'm for what Dr. W. Edwards Deming calls profound knowledge. And it takes a bit of time and effort to acquire profound knowledge. And it's a lot more useful in your daily life and the rest of your career than having a certification that hopefully doesn't fool anybody. So we're not going to certify anybody. You're either going to get knowledge you can use in your daily work or not. I hope you'll get a lot of practical ideas you can use in, starting today and this week. We're going to take qualities and costs far more seriously than normal. Qualities, I mean, things like security, technical debt, usability, those kinds of technical qualities. And at a larger scale, I call them values. That is, there are some stakeholders who value those qualities and other things, which we call values. But we're very value focused and quality focused, and we always look at the costs. And I found too many of the architectural systems that people are taught in practice, they don't look at qualities or values at all. They talk about it, but if you take a look, they don't do it. They don't define the qualities quantitatively so we know exactly what they are and can track and trace and use them to decide on what is a good architecture. And in addition, they don't look at the costs. This is one reason why we accumulate technical debt in systems, is nobody's concerned about the future cost of maintaining the system when they choose architectures, some of which will have very high technical debt in the future. So by costs, I mean money costs, time costs, people costs, and any other limited resource, such as storage space in a system, such as a watch or something like that. So we're going to take the qualities, plural, many, and the costs, many, very seriously. We believe that's fundamental to this kind of architecture. One problem is that everybody is working at a larger and larger scale than they ever were. Things are more and more complex than they ever were. And the methods that might have worked 5, 10, 15 years ago just aren't good enough for that scale. And the central addition is the engineering idea of quantification of all the values, qualities, and costs. Now, if we do not, let's see, okay, to fiddle with the page, I have to get rid of the annotate. Okay, I'm learning the annotate. Clear all the drawings. Okay. Now, if we don't use these tools, we're going to make bad architectural decisions. Bad means they're too costly, they're not effective, they won't work in the long term, they have dangerous side effects. And so basically, we need to upgrade what every discipline has to do finally when it gets large and complex. We have to upgrade to an engineering set of ideas. And engineering means a lot more quantification, calculation, logic, and less intuitive and hope for the best and things like that. The quantification is the distinction between an art, and let me describe current enterprise architecture as an art and a craft, okay, which is okay for small scale systems. And we're going to move in the direction of engineering, science, good management, logic, traceability, responsibility, who is responsible for things, for large international systems or even very large national systems like the National Health Service or government systems or things like that. We're going to basically be battling complexity, a very large number of things that have to fit together in building and maintaining large-scale systems. Okay, so it's kind of irritating. I have to turn off the annotate every time. Okay, there we go. Let's see. Okay, now I believe that architecture needs quantification very badly to articulate ideas like how much security you require, how much user friendliness, how much ease of modification or maintenance of the system do you need. You can't just say we're going to have a secure system, which is binary and has actually no particular meaning, and we're going to have a user-friendly system. You have to say how much security, in fact, many types of security for many types of purposes, as we'll see in more detail starting next Thursday. So we need a much richer picture of these requirements and value requirements. And we need quantification as one tool, but not the only tool, for saying exactly how much we require by delivery of the system at future times. And let's see. Now, I've written many books about this subject, but we can stick with this. And you'll notice at the end of the book, there are some references to a lot of other books, and I may refer to them as I go along. So actually quite a lot of, order of magnitude 10 free books on the subject. But this one will probably do most of you in the meantime. But note that there are lots of other specialized texts. For example, there's a specialized text on just simply how to quantify all the qualities called quantiering. Yeah, let's see. Now, me presenting these ideas, I regard as a hopeless case. That is, I don't expect that within the year, everybody will throw away all their certifications and their TOGAFs and ZACMANs and things like that and start doing this, even though that would be the logical thing to do. So it's going to take time, but I'm hoping that some of you will start doing this and you will succeed better than others and be recognized, and you will become teachers. You may even like to start a business of teaching. I hope you won't certify anybody in this stuff, but at least, you know, teaching, coaching, and coaching teams to teach these methods. One thing about these methods is that you can pick them up bit by bit, incrementally. That is, I'm not asking you to adopt the whole culture at once. You can even be in your current enterprise architecture culture, however bad I might think it is, and you can take one idea, such as quantification of the values, and just do that, and do not the other 95% of the methods, and see how that works. So you can, in a sense, ease yourself into the new methods step by step, proving them, getting confidence in them, giving other people confidence in them. And then at some point, after a set of increments, you will be doing all of this method and the old method will have disappeared. So in other words, I consider these things as tools. I have a book called Technoscopes. You'll find that at gilb.com if you want a starting point, but you'll find it in the references. And that's 100 separate tools for dealing with complexity, okay? And so quantifying a quality is one such tool. And so you could take one tool every week for 100 weeks. That would be about 2 years of your time, wouldn't it? And then you'd be doing all the things I'm teaching about. We need to get to a stage where management will recognize the power and the value of doing these things, and will only hire and employ people who can do things better, and they may ask for some kind of training or knowledge or practical capability in using the methods. My objective is, and the reason this is free and the books are free, is I just want to try and spread the best ideas I know about. If you know about some better ideas, I do welcome the feedback. So anybody who'd like to argue they have a better idea or know about a better idea, please do email me at any time. I'd be very pleased if you'd like to copy the ideas in a paper you write, a book you write, a course you hold, or some training. You can, from my point of view, the ideas are free, but anybody is welcome to package them and sell them. Be nice if you credited the source, but I won't sue you if you don't. You can make a business of spreading these methods. So I hope some of you are thinking, I can make a business of spreading. I've had a very good business spreading these methods, it turns out. So you're welcome to commercialize the ideas, but I hope you don't do it in a silly way like certifications and exams that can be taken online that don't mean anything and things like that. I mean, you really spread the ideas effectively, please. And then for your training and your consulting and the apps you might build, you should get paid. Okay. I'm giving away the ideas, and I believe that ideas are free, but hard work to spread them and coach for them should get paid as usual. So here's another view. If you take a look at Google any kind of failure rates for IT projects, just Google IT project failure rates, you find all kinds of things, but what you find is huge total failure or partial failure. I mean, not 1%, but we're like in total here, 85, 95% of everything has some degree of failure. So I'm concerned that our IT projects fail. Now, they've been doing this for a long time, even before enterprise architecture was popular. And everybody's clear about the idea that somehow we're not managing these things right. So they come up with things, agile being one, attempting to do something. And here we are even separating projects with enterprise architecture have a slightly lower challenged failure rate, but only slightly lower than projects without. In other words, the difference between having enterprise architecture as we know it and not is not very big. It's like, it'd be nice if the enterprise architecture stuff was down there, significantly different, but it isn't. So enterprise architecture, we know it is clearly not making a difference in the success of projects. And I'd like to think the methods I'm going to teach you will make a dramatic and immediate difference in the degree of successful delivery of values to stakeholders, okay? Here's another comment on all this, but but basically it's not very powerful. Okay. Now, I'm going to give you, I'm not just going to wave my arms and say you ought to draw some nice diagrams and here's the diagramming language. That's my oversimplified view of enterprise architecture. But I'm going to give you some very specific tools, and I'll talk about the tools here. So first, I'm going to give you a thing I call my planning language, also called Planguage. It is defined officially and formally, almost as a set of standards, in a book I call Competitive Engineering. Now, you'll find you can download a free digital copy of Competitive Engineering by going to the references in back here. So you get the handbook. One friend of mine, who's actually a real architect and doing some very exciting artificial intelligence architecture apps at Graphmetrics, he claims he's using competitive engineering as the framework for his automated artificial intelligence tools. And he also claims he's read competitive engineering 9 times. I almost didn't believe him, but I'm beginning to believe him. Reading competitive engineering once is a dramatic feat, like reading a dictionary once or reading the Bible once. But reading it 9 times. Now that either means that it's so difficult to understand that you have to read it 9 times before you understand it, or there's so much gold in there that you can mine more good information if you read it multiple times. Don't think you got everything on the first pass. I don't know, but you can quickly today take a free look at the competitive engineering book. And but that is basically written as a standard for the language, the planning language. Now, what's the planning language? Well, I'm going to call it the C language, SEAL, just for fun, because the language can be used for architecture. And that's mainly what we're going to be teaching. But language consists of things about requirements of all kinds, designs or architecture of all kinds, and evaluations of how good the architecture is, and feedback about how good the architecture was when implemented incrementally, and things like that. So it is, in fact, an architecture language, or a language for planning architecture. So I'm going to give you a language. Now, what's a language? Languages tend to have glossaries of terms. So I'm going to give you, and this is reference P4, it's a free downloadable glossary, a glossary of about 700 concepts where we define things like requirement or function or architecture or engineering. You can look up all those terms. And I have decided, I alone have decided, with a little bit of editing help from my friends, on the meaning of 700 concepts. Part of the beauty of that is that I don't have to fight with anybody else and do compromises. And the other is I can do this, I've been doing this for 20, 30 years, so it's a long-term glossary. I didn't just invent it yesterday. And that all these 700 terms, they're integrated one with the other. That is, every one of the terms knows about the other terms. And you'll find that's unusual, actually. So take a look at it. But now you might say, but Tom, I don't agree with your use of the term architecture or your use of the term objective or strategy. And I say, well, yeah, there's a problem there because everybody has their own opinion and everybody has a right to their opinion. But if I'm going to write a book, hold a course, I need to define my terms so you can figure out what I'm saying. You can use another word for the concept we're talking about, if you prefer. Okay, I don't care. I'm not going to stop you. I do not demand that you use my terms, but I do demand that you interpret what I say and I write using my glossary. Otherwise, you're misinterpreting and we're both wasting our time. So I'm going to give you the glossary. It's given. You can download it as we speak from reference at the back here, P4. It's sort of tempting. Let's see, there we go. It's almost tempting to go to the end and show this while I'm talking about it. By the way, there is a glossary for this talk built in, so you'll see some of the terms here, but that's just a subset of the 700 person glossary, but there it is. There's a definition of architecture, a design process, producing a specification, which is the top level design process from a defined point of view, like the organizational point of view, and which coordinates or balances all subsidiary considerations of value, resources, and constraints. And those subsidiary things are what I call engineering. Won't get into that. Here are several pages of references. Let's take a rough look at them. This is the overview. So here are some books, quite a few. Here's the Quantier book that I referred to about the art of quantifying your value ideas, which is our first and main subject. You can download that anytime you like. Here's a nice little book. I did it this summer too, called Planalysis, a book with advice on how to analyze plans and make them better. In other words, you as an architect will be fed some ideas of what you're supposed to do. This is how to analyze that stuff and convert it into logical, clear statements that you can work with. Okay. Here are some older books. Here's the Technoscopes book I mentioned that has 100 tools, practical tools. We are selling that right now, but if somebody says, I promise you I'll read it, but I can't possibly afford it, I will send you a free copy on request. Okay, I don't mean to put a paid barrier there, but we did that for a set of books at some point. So, but anybody poor but eager to learn will always get books free from me, but you can see them here. Here are a number of papers, case studies, all kinds of things. Let's see. Do we want to, here's something on scaling things up to very large systems that might interest some of you. Everybody in the agile business is interested in scaling up, and that is one of the problems here, is scaling up the architectural tools. Here are some more free downloadable papers, like papers on risk, papers on stakeholders. Here are slides that I've used for this and that. Sometimes it's easier to read slides than papers, but here is slides from Boeing, and it's actually case study stuff of how these methods have been used to build airplanes. Here's more about scaling up. Okay, some of you don't like to read. You may even be dyslexic, like several people in my family, the most intelligent ones, and you might prefer videos. So we're videoing this and we'll publish it, but we've got lots and lots of other videos on different subjects, like the Technoscopes book I mentioned. Here's a whole video on it. So download and instead of doing Netflix and other questionable things, you can download these. By the way, please feel free to share this with anybody in the world who's a nice person you'd like to help with ideas. Okay, and diverse other references to get to later. Okay, so clearly we have lots and lots of free downloads, and some not quite as free, and but not terribly expensive either. Let's see. Hello. Okay. Let's see where we were. We were there. Okay. Now, in addition, I'm a fanatic on the idea of principles. For example, one principle I'm going to teach, which is dominant here, is that you cannot evaluate and decide on architecture except with reference to a quantified set of values and costs, about 15 at least, okay? And that's not what people are doing in enterprise architecture these days at all. So I believe that the current methods do not give us any logical basis for evaluating which architecture choices we should make. But that's what architecture is, making choices. So, but that's a major principle, that you have to have these really clear requirements in order to decide on your architecture. Now, in the competitive engineering book, this one, there are 10 chapters and 10 subchapters, in fact, 100 things. And in every chapter, there are 10 principles. So there's a chapter on value requirements, quality requirements, and it has 10 principles. And you'll see as I go through this book, I've got lots of principles, like I've got principles of decomposition, principles of prioritization in the book here. And so I believe in summarizing ideas in a short sentence called a principle. And I believe that that principle should be valid in all future time for all kinds of systems. It should be sort of universally valid, but it should also be powerful and sharp, and a sort of reminder about how to operate as an architect. That is, so I recommend learning and using the principles. So I'm going to give you not only the 100 principles in competitive engineering book, but a few hundred other principles, because every paper I write and every book I write I tend to summarize things in terms of principles. In addition, and in the competitive engineering book, I have a set of things called rules. Now, rules are standards for how to articulate architecture. Okay, so one very, very fundamental rule is that a quality requirement must be quantified. And if it's not quantified, if it just says better security, then it violates the rule It is a defective specification. It is not allowed. Your specification is now useless for all practical purposes. And so we use rules to actually talk about good practices. We use the rules to do quality control and make sure we have a very low number of violations. Instead of 100 violations per page of good rules, we like to get down to 0.1 or 0.2. Those are the levels that Intel, for example, uses before they allow, for example, requirements to go to the architect. The architect should not have garbage in because there are no rules, because there is no quality control. And I find rules and quality control not very well done, to put it mildly, in the current architectural technique. But so in every chapter of the competitive engineering book that is about a specification type, which is about 7 of the 10 chapters, there is a suggested set of rules. And I've discovered that my clients basically like to adopt the rules as is without a lot of change. They like the rules. They're well thought out, they're well tried. And again, you have my permission to adopt any of the standards, no cost. You have my permission to modify them also, okay, to taste. So it's a free set of standards or good practices. Again, in the competitive engineering book, all the different ideas there, they are described in terms of a process, whatever that means, but it's defined. But it's for example, there's a process of quantifying a quality, okay? And we described the process for quantifying any quality in a chapter of the competitive engineering book. So these are just recommended sequences of doing things, okay? There is, I'm not going to emphasize this graphical icons very much, but it is very popular in the architecture culture to have graphical agreements of what things mean. And in fact, I have developed a whole graphical icon language. And looking at reference P12, you'll get some more information about it. So the icons are designed to be international and without use of language, okay? So you'll be seeing a few of them. Well, enough of that for the moment. Oh, sorry, there are 2 classes of icons. One are called keyed icons. That is, you can reproduce them using your keyboard. And the others are drawn icons, so they're free of the keyboard. And hopefully the drawn and the keyed icons look like each other to some degree. But it's very, very convenient to have a keyed alternative to an icon, so you don't have to get into some kind of a drawing mode. Okay. So another thing we're going to do is we love this word systems in the widest possible sense of the word. So even though most of us are probably designing an IT system, we are very much going to go into the human aspects of the system, such as the culture, the nature of the older systems, the partners, the competitors, all the stakeholders, all 50 or 500 stakeholders, contracts that people write. In other words, we're going to go way beyond the scope of conventional enterprise architecture to tackle anything that makes a difference in delivering our values at lowest possible cost to our stakeholders. So I call that systems engineering. And I believe that if we don't enlarge our scope seriously, we will continue. It's one of the reasons we fail, and we'll continue to fail, is that we've failed. A very simple example of that, I like to take, everybody here in Norway knows about our attempt to make a COVID app called Smitte Stop, or contagion stopping device. And the guys at Simula who built it completely failed to seriously consider the European Union agreement for privacy called GDPR. When some of my good friends in Norway, who are more idealistic than Simula, tried to point that out, they were unsuccessful at similar level, but they got the government to agree that the government had agreed to have decent GDPR privacy, and the whole of Smitterstop was dropped instantaneously and a whole new one had to be built. Now, that's an example of somebody did the architecture of Smitterstop without proper systems thinking about a stakeholder known as the European Union laws on privacy. Okay, so that's a great Norwegian example of failed systems for lack of systems thinking. Now, you might argue that they knew about it, but they thought that stopping the coronavirus was more important than privacy. And the answer is they were wrong in their evaluation, turns out, according to the government and the law and other things. For years, we've been doing all my methods with things like word processors and spreadsheets for decades. But recently, one app in particular called Valplan, so look at this, has been built, which actually knows all the rules and all the formats and all the terminology. So we normally, when teaching and using the method, use Valplan, and anybody can at least get themselves a free trial, and you'll be looking at outputs from Valplan during the course. So there is an app that you can use to do all this stuff. And I don't know, I couldn't imagine doing it any other way. But you can. You are not dependent on the app. You can use paper and pencil to use these methods. But again, Shakespeare didn't need a word processor, but he might have used one if he'd had one. Let's see. I think I'll skip a little bit. We have a thing coming up here, which is just about to be materialized, called Trinity Tools at Graphmetrics. But in fact, the first thing it's going to do is take my competitive engineering book and analyze it in Trinity. That's said to be about 2 weeks away, but let's just say I'll talk about it when it happens. But it's also a very powerful tool for doing architecture, and it's designed by an architect. But let's forget that for the moment. Let's see. What are we doing on time? We got a quarter of an hour left. Here's the Trinity stuff, which I'll gloss over until I have something more to show. So I've basically given you the overview. Now, the last 15 minutes, I think I'll scan the other pages that we'll go through in more detail, just stopping to make a point or show something, give you this is what we're going to start on chapter 1 on Thursday. So here are the core C principles, okay, the top 3. So the first is that stakeholders determine values and requirements, okay? Now, notice I didn't say users and customers, okay? And you're probably all working in a culture that probably does some agile stuff with some user stories and use cases and things like that. And great that we're user focused, especially in small systems. But in large systems, you get things like the European Union GDPR laws that come into play. And they determine the values and requirements, not just the users. You might say in any medium-sized system, there are maybe 50 core stakeholders, like the European Union laws. And in a small system where you're just whipping up a website for a friend, maybe you don't have to worry too much about this. But in large systems, you must identify all 50 stakeholders, of which maybe 1 or 5 are users, and 1 or 5 to 5 are customers. And the rest are not users, and they're not customers, but they do determine the requirements for the architecture. They do state their values like privacy and transparency, okay? So first thing I want you to latch onto is you've got to go for the stakeholder thinking. I intend this summer to write a whole book about it, but I've collected a lot of information about stakeholder. There doesn't seem to be a good book on it yet, but I've been developing the theory of stakeholders. Stakeholder concept is very well known and understood in large scale systems engineering, such as military and space. They take it for granted there, and they have for decades. But stakeholders is just very weak in the IT sector, where users and customers have been dominant until now. But it's time to change and say that it's all the critical stakeholders. Critical means they can shut you down. They can say your system is illegal. They can say we won't buy your system, okay? So we have to identify, by definition, all the critical stakeholders, or we risk a failed project. That's how important this principle is, okay? Now, moving to principle number 2, the value requirements, in other words, the values that the stakeholders value, these requirements determine the architecture, okay? In other words, you have to first know the stakeholders that are critical. Then you have to know the critical values they have, the ones that will, if you don't satisfy those values, the system will fail. You're totally wasting your time. And then you have to use that value information to determine the necessary architecture for smittestopp in Norway to satisfy the GDPR in EU. Okay, so this is a very dominant principle. The architecture cultures that I've seen do not take this seriously. They do not even define the value requirements in a serious way. For example, quantified. Okay, so this is very critical. If we do a major pivot or change in our culture, if we just get this, but this again is dependent on this. That is, value understanding is dependent on stakeholder understanding. Okay. And finally, there's a set of requirements which are not values of stakeholders, but there are things like costs and constraints, and these are formally determined. And finally, you might have several architectures which will deliver the values, but some of them might be too expensive, or some of them might be outside the EU, which might be a constraint, things like that. And so we have to bring in more formally costs and constraints when we're evaluating not only what architecture to use at all, but for example, what sequence to deliver them in, prioritization. Okay, and here's a little diagram of everything I've just said. We've got 13 more minutes. Let's take a look at our friends' stakeholders. Okay, and I'm gonna take a little glass of water. This is a thing I've made a little note, coming summer at the summer cabin, write a book on stakeholders, and maybe 4 others, as I usually do. Somebody push me and make me do it, prioritize it. Okay, here you have a little stakeholder. This is actually using the output of Valplan, the tool. So here you have stakeholders. Here's an individual, such as a C-level executives, chief technical officer or founder. Here are groups of people, such as the board of directors or employees or managers or nurses or unions. And we started there, then we began to realize that if we were really looking for critical requirements for our architecture, we had to go beyond the idea of people of some kind, that we could ask, what are your requirements? Call that business analysis. And we began to discover that, for example, the moment you're having a COVID crisis, all the requirements are quite different. You may have noticed. The moment the British actually do Brexit, all bets are off on certain things. Okay, everything is different. The moment there's a terrorist attack in progress, the requirements are quite different. The moment there is a war, or even just a landslide in as we had recently in Norway, perhaps weather caused, not to mention the economic crisis, 10% of everybody have no job whatsoever. So in what I call environments, actually are a stakeholder in the sense that they create different requirements and different constraints. So we have to be able to identify critical requirements, critical environments, and what their requirements are. And then we, at a fairly early stage, we began to realize that even though the official international engineering definitions of stakeholders assume they're all people that you can interview, we quickly discovered there were some inanimate things, such as plans and contracts and laws and standards that were not people. They're made by people, they're read by people, but they are not people. And you can't talk to them and interview and get their feelings on subjects, but you can read them, analyze them, and derive requirements from them. Okay, so here's the GDPR international law saying privacy is very important, and feed that into your requirements so as to decide your architecture. But it's almost like the whole international community, if you look at the standards, have forgotten that there's a class of stakeholders that are not people. Take a look at the definitions. You'll find examples of this in the competitive engineering glossary, the bad definitions. Look under stakeholder. Fairly recently, that is within the last 3 years, we discovered there was a class of people called weak victims. In other words, people who can't fight for themselves, they're not rich, they don't have power, and we sympathize with them. Think of the little boy washed up on the Greek shore, trying to immigrate. And it turns out they changed the rules too. For example, about how many refugees Norway is willing to take. Okay, the architecture of immigration to Norway problem. And then we discovered that not only were there weak victims that gave us critical requirements, but there were defenders of weak victims, like the charities who stood up for them, or the government bodies, or the media fighting for power for the weak ones, United Nations, etc. So, in other words, systematically analyzing. So this is not a full list of all possible stakeholders. This is a general template designed to teach you what stakeholders, what I mean by stakeholders, and how rich it is. And to my knowledge, you won't find anything vaguely resembling this anywhere else that is so rich, but do tell me if you know. But there are a couple of interesting websites on stakeholders that I've found quite recently. They don't have a big voice, but they do. Other people are beginning to interest in this. Okay, now I only have 8 more minutes, but this is a preview of something I'm going to talk a lot more about. Here's a map done by the Valplan tool again. Let's see if I can. Here, for a real project, which was spreading knowledge in the whole of Poland, this the architecture of that, which includes all the school systems, but all other ways of doing it, is the stakeholder set. So this is a real stakeholder set, okay? And then here is a set of values using the arrow symbol or icon, okay? And these are defined quantitatively, but you can read them and say, aha, those are the values we think about when trying to spread knowledge, better schooling and education and things like that. And then the little light bulb here is the tools icon for bright idea, otherwise known as strategy, okay? Otherwise known as architecture, otherwise known as design. Now, one of the things the tool does for us so neatly is that it digitally knows about connections. So it knows that, for example, these 3 stakeholders, follow the arrow, are interested, for example, in technical learning, okay? And it also says that technical learning doesn't have any arrows going up to strategies. Therefore, we have no architecture. but it does know that this stakeholder libraries has a connection to acquire new library resources, but it has no strategy coupled to it. These lines here, these are when we have identified an architecture or strategy to deliver value, deliver these values. So if you like, this becomes a little completeness index. For example, we have many stakeholders for which we have no objectives. There are these, they're just not connected to anything, at least not known. And we have many requirements which have no strategies, indicating incomplete architecture. But so this is like an initial picture in the first 2 or 3 days of planning. But we can now systematically say, if these indeed are stakeholders, it means they have some values or requirements. And if they don't, they shouldn't be here because they're not critical stakeholders. But if they do, we must identify them, put them on the map, and make sure something gets done about it. If we have some requirements or strategies, but they have no connection to any strategies, it means we haven't yet done our architecture work, and we need to find something that will deliver to this strategy. So this is again from Valplan, and of course, it digitally, as we accumulate the design through time, even through operation of the system, this helps us keep various maps quite automatically. Just print out the overview diagram, but we have quite a few other views. But digitally, stakeholders know about requirements, know about architecture, and we can keep track of things and find fundamental failings in our systematic thinking. Let's see, no, I think that's enough for 1 hour overview. So I'll leave that there. Anybody can read ahead as much as they want. If you wanted to read it 9 times, maybe that's the required level, but have a scan through. What I'll do now is complete my lectures, look at the big picture of all your happy faces. Please do turn on your video if you're not shy, and I will entertain any oral questions for about half an hour. And at 5:30, my alarm will go and say that's the end of today. Please feel free to turn on your microphone and ask a question.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. It was quite interesting. I've mentioned before, I thought your idea of stakeholders is very interesting, because a lot of the other methods, they think of stakeholders in terms of who is paying your bill.
That's
and
called
the customer, yeah. So it's looking very much, what does the customer want? Very much focused on that.
And that's important. That's one of the stakeholders, but it's not the other 49. Like the European Union didn't pay for Smittestop, but boy, did they stop Smittestop. You see? So this is just a logical observation. Systems fail because stakeholders are not satisfied. Stakeholders are not satisfied because nobody bothered to think about them seriously. And that's the job of an architect above all. It's not a job of a programmer. Okay? It's the job of the architect to look at this broad picture called the stakeholders and their values, and by the way, their power. Now, paying for something is a class of power, but legal power is also power, even if you're not paying.
Yeah. Let's see, does anybody else have any questions?
Notice my email is up there. So you're very welcome to send me email anytime. I love to get the emails, people interested, good questions. Do your homework a little bit. I mean, don't force me to read the book to you, but say, I've read the book and this is unclear, or the link doesn't work, or can you recommend special literature on that? That's fine. But do send me emails. I'll be very happy to answer your questions.
Yeah, I can post a link to the book on the comments of the meetup site.
Right.
if
And
somebody doesn't have it.
remember, it's in the links are all in the C book, which itself is digital. So all you have to do is download the C book and press the link there. It's in all those references at the end.
Tom,
Yes. Right.
those web pages that you talked about, that was having something about stakeholders. How can you provide a URL for them? Where you found
Now, I'm not sure which web pages you're referring to. Help me out a bit.
you was talking about stakeholders, and you was saying something about you can find something about that on the web.
I'm still not sure what you're referring to.
Well, but I think,
by the way, everything I've referred to is either in this book, which is a linked download. Let's remind everybody, there's the QR, there is the link to the book. So everything I showed you today is in that link in the book, tinyurl.com/sysentarcbook, or you can scan the QR with your iPhone. So everything is there. And then at the end of the book, I showed you there are about 5 pages of references with links. So I think the answer is it might also be in the references in the links. Now, if that doesn't help you, we know each other, so send me an email and clarify what you want. I will send you a link, I promise you. Does that help initially?
Yeah, we do that.
Okay.
Yeah, we do that. Thanks.
While you're thinking of questions, I'm going to tell you a short story about why enterprise architecture is as bad as it is. And it's basically the same reason that Agile is as bad as it is, because there's a mafia racket of selling certifications and short courses teaching you nothing that works very well because people are foolish enough to pay for it. It's like drugs, okay? And so one of my friends in England set me up with a very interesting meeting with a guy called Zachman, who you will recognize is leader of a major method there. And we were at the Explorers Club in London, quite interesting. And we had a whole evening to talk. And I briefly presented my methods to him. And I said, my methods are far superior to your methods, Zachman. What do you think? That's pretty cheeky, of course. And he said, well, that might be, Tom, but it doesn't matter. And I say, why not? And he said, because I've spent the last 10 years in lawsuits getting the rights to my methods and suing people. And I only have 10 more years to live because I'm an old man. So I'm going to live off the old stuff no matter how bad it is. That's why you have bad stuff that doesn't get better. People have got locked into something they found could be sold to fools who will buy the stuff. And they're not there saying, I'm going to constantly update it with the best stuff available. That's how a method should be like that. It's constantly updated with the best. My method is open-ended and open for update. Anybody can take the base and start updating it, or take half of the base and update it with what they have. So in other words, we're constantly inventing new good ideas, and we have to be open for them and not have a lot of old men selling bad stuff statically. That's my little story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, but there is a need to document competence, and certifications fulfill that need. And although they're not that good and they don't really prove that you know it, but you don't really have, as long as you don't have a better solution, then you fall back onto that one.
Okay. Now, let me take the key word, need to document competence. I don't believe that the certificates in architecture agile document any interesting competence at all, ever. Total junk. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I believe that competence is the ability to deliver value for money to stakeholders. Now, in my method, which is also based on agile, that means in the very short term, like the week after you do the architecture sketch, we start delivering sprints which are measurable value to the organization. And if you deliver measurable value in the short term at low cost, you have demonstrated your competence. That's the only interesting competence development is real stuff, not faked certificates. We're into the age of faked vaccine certificates now, you may have noticed. You can get a fake university certificate from Trump University any day you like. The ability to do real stuff measurably in the short term, that is your certificate. Those are your case study. You write up what you've done, and the next job you apply for, you lay that on the table and said, this is what happened to my architectures. We delivered so much security in the first month and so much user friendliness in the first quarter and at these costs. And that was my architecture that decided to do it. That's your certificate, your case studies of what you did as an architect.
Do you have time for another question?
Absolutely. We have time until 5:30, Jon, just for information. And you can snakke norsk om du vil. Maybe better to do it in English.
I can do both. Yeah, okay. I'm guessing there are some English speakers online as well. So,
of course.
I'm not sure if you know, there's a Norwegian tool called RDoc, ARDOC. That's a modeling tool for enterprise architecture.
Would you send me a link to it, Jon, please?
Yeah, I can do that.
I may have bumped into it, but my memory doesn't record anything about it. But I'll tell you what I do whenever I see a tool. I ask a very simple question. How would I articulate the security requirement? Would it be quantified how much security or not? Or does it totally hop over the idea of clarifying the critical values? If it totally skips over clear articulation of critical values, then it is a worthless tool in my estimation. Worthless.
No, it can do, but that's you're allowed to do what you want to with the tool. That's
then you could say that about word processors.
It's kind of
you can write anything you want.
It's a tool like your for that stakeholders. It's a tool for managing connections and automatically filtering
I'll
those.
take a look at it, and I'll give you a personal opinion by email.
Yeah,
but for me, that's never a good enough answer. You can do it. A tool that says you have to quantify your critical qualities. That there is no option. There is no logical option. That's an okay tool, but the moment they say you can just say we need good security and then dive and specify encryption as the architecture, that is the bad tools we have today.
Yeah. There's two people that have already added a link to the site in the chat. So
good. But would you still email it to me, because the chat disappears after the session is over, and I'm not even.
I'll do that. Yeah. No
right now.
No. RDoc helps you to draw Archimate. Document your system using Archimates. That's basically.
Right. Well, generally speaking, I'm probably not going to be very impressed.
Okay. Well, you can do a lot more than just Archimate, but yeah.
Okay. No. The core idea is this quantification of the critical values.
Yeah.
If that's in there as a necessary logical component, I'm prepared to be impressed. If it is not there,
it isn't like that. But you are free to add that as a necessary.
Free to add doesn't count.
No.
But I'll tell you what. Add my ideas to Archimate. That's okay.
Yeah.
And I will help the Norwegian developers of that do adding of my stuff if they want to. No problem. They're welcome to the ideas. But it has to be obligatory. It can't be an option to skip over the privacy for smittestop and fail with the whole app. That cannot be an option. That's failure. Yeah. We do have time until 17:30 if we want to use it for questions. So I'm just going to deep breath and welcome and spread the word. So I think how many hundreds of people can we tackle on this broadcast?
Our license covers 100 people.
Okay.
So
well, get in there before it's all taken up.
So Tom, one question. Those who are starting their enterprise architecture journey, are there any prerequisites that you suggest to understand the material that you will be covering?
To understand the methods that I will be covering? Was that the question?
The material.
Material, okay. Long story short, the SEA book, is this visible?
Yeah.
Yes.
That is, to keep life simple, that's the textbook for everything here and all of my methods. And anything actually not covered, like scaling up, to take an example, that is covered by the additional references at the back end of the book. So everything is covered by this one book, is one way of thinking about it. Now, if there's something missing for any reason, and you email me, maybe I'll add it to the book, you know, and maybe we'll spread it. But this is more than good enough for in terms of my methods. The other major book I've already referred to is the competitive engineering book, which is also a free download. By the way, you can buy paper copies if you prefer at some ridiculous price like $60, but you can get a free download of the competitive engineering book, CE. That's also if you like, it's the standard for my methods. It's defined somewhat more formally than this SEA book. So those two books together are pretty good partners, and they're free, they're digital, and you can exploit the information for your own internal standards or for packaging products of consultancy, coaching, and apps, if you like. It's freeware.
Yeah. But maybe not offering certifications in it.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I'm trying to make a joke. Maybe not offering certifications.
Right.
That would be the easiest way to monetize it.
Yeah, right. Well, actually at our website, guild.com, we do offer some certifications, but it's sort of forced to do it by the market or nobody'd buy it because they have to have a certification. But we don't really believe in that. Okay. But if you desperately want a certification, go to guild.com and buy yourself a certification. You know, they're like video courses and things like that. Okay. But we sincerely believe that it is the practical work you do and the results you have that is your certification, your CV, your bragging rights when you apply for a job and want to say how good you are. What did you do and how well did it work? And do you have the numbers to prove it? That's who you are. And if you can't do that, it doesn't matter how many pieces of paper you have from a university or a certification. It's worthless.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, Stein.
Nice to see you again.
Yes, Stein has attended twice the courses of OSWA in Oslo. Yeah, that's right. And he lent me a wonderful book that I've returned. Glad to see it's come back.
Yes, thank you very much.
How we in Norway use ridiculous sums of money for smittestopp and things like that.
I recommend this book for everybody working with the IT systems.
Okay, tax money that disappeared.
Yes.
Yes, I recommend it too.
One question is about what everybody is challenging is legacy systems.
Okay, right.
And it's using a method to start a new project is mostly the most convenient way of approaching a project to get good results. But that's not the case for most people. They join an organization with their terms, their way of working, like a legacy system. Do you have any principles or thoughts about how to influence an organization like the legacy system on requirements, on designs, on ways of working? Right.
Yes, I do. And I'll summarize. Now, there are two approaches. Let's name them. The one is attacking technical debt, right? And the other is using agile or evolutionary delivery to evolve the new system from the old system, okay? So let me, these are two attacks. Everybody has an old system, even if it's not an IT old system, okay? So let me take the first one, the technical debt. We have a very good example in Norway in the Confirm It case study. So Confirm It is a Norwegian organization, but you look in the reference under Confirm It, you'll find that they brilliantly used my methods to attack their 8-year-old technical debt by quantifying 10 different factors of technical debt and then engineering 1 week every month continuously the attack on the technical debt, which was a major problem for them. Okay, so that's an actually Norway was a pioneer in engineering and using my methods for the attack on technical debt. So that's enough of that. Number two, for all of my life from 1960, when I did my first systems at Brødrene Doblau, which old people might even recognize the name of down by Stortorvet, but I have done a form of agile. I have an old system there, and one step at a time, maybe in 20 to 50 steps, I change the old system and improve the value, check that I've really improved it, and then take a new step. I've been doing that since 1960. Okay, it was the basis of my understanding of agile, which I published as early as 1976 in my software metrics book. You know, one step at a time, delivering value, measuring what happened. So now, in other words, the worst thing you can do is build a whole new system before you deliver it. Okay, people are, not least the Norwegian government, is constantly doing that and constantly failing. Okay, so the only sane attack on a big old system is one small element at a time. Now, people are in denial. They say you can't do that. We must have new machines and new software. Well, you'll get them sooner or later. But if you use 8 years to plan the e-health systems and then ask for another 22 billion kroner for another 8 years, you're not doing this, okay? 8 years ago, the Norwegian government should have year by year improved the government health systems. They spent 20 million kroner doing nothing except getting a plan to suck more money to PwC from the government, okay? This is the book that Stein is referring to, by the way. Okay? So the government don't have this idea that, by the way, they have the idea in managing COVID, one dynamic step at a time with feedback and learning. They, if they didn't get that idea, we'd all be dead. It took that. But in building IT systems, we always need to build them one small step at a time, incrementally, moving in the direction of our long-term values. I believe in weekly steps. In extremely large systems like NAV, maybe monthly or quarterly steps. Okay, and each step should, in a sense, replace parts of the old system, maybe with new kit, okay, maybe with new software, maybe with better databases, but it should deliver a result to NAV, to the employees or stakeholders of NAV, every step of the way. Now, if they can't do that, there's no indication they can build the big new system in the sky and that it'll all suddenly work 8 years from now. Forget it. It's a basic test of competence that you can make small but critical prioritized changes to the existing culture. If you can't do that, you're not a good architect, and you're not a good agilist, and you're not a good manager of IT systems change. Those are my answers, Steinator. You probably knew that, but
but a good thing can it only gets better when it's repeated.
Sorry, I didn't.
A good thing gets better when it's repeated.
Well, for example, the attempt to attack a large IT system and give value, the more you do it, the more you learn how to do it and how to do it well. So that is definitely a repetition of what I call an evolutionary step process. That's chapter 10 of the competitive engineering book. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. You get better at setting realistic goals, finding realistic resources, finding good architecture, and measuring how it goes. And you get better and better at delivering. Confirm It, by the way, is another a good Norwegian example of doing exactly that with great success. Look on the world market. Look at the Confirm It study for Norwegian examples of doing this in practice, step by step, and conquering the world market. Thanks for the question.
Just to follow up on that, you have Gall's law, which says that any complicated system that works started as a simple system that works.
Yes.
You cannot start with a complicated system that works as your starting point.
By the way, I knew John Gall. I invited him to my Guildfest in London one year with his wife. He's died now, unfortunately.
Wow.
But so I respect John Gall, G-A-L-L, and his work. You can buy a whole book of his principles. So he's a wise man, collected good information, and he understands this idea of simple changes, not 8 more years, 22 billion kroner will build the Norwegian health system. You've got to be joking. But I would tell the prime minister this, but she wouldn't listen. I've tried to tell the health minister, and he wouldn't listen, Mr. Høie. I've tried. Okay, so the ministers aren't listening. They're out there spending your taxpayer dollars like you wouldn't, kroner, like you wouldn't believe irresponsibly, right? There's the documentation that they're doing that. They won't listen. I think we need a catastrophe like a worldwide coronavirus before they'll begin to listen to these ideas. Need to be death threatened.
Yeah, Stein, can you put a comment on the meetup site with the name of the book?
Yeah, I will do that.
Yeah,
with the ISBN number and everything.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
No, but it's also interesting the way they're working with the coronavirus now. Like you said, they try something and they get the feedback and then they do it again.
Yeah.
If the health sector is used to working like that, then they should be able to work like that on the IT systems as well. But they think
So
that
here's
is
the
something
thing.
else.
Very good point. You see, notice that as with Fauci in the US, science has taken over. We're being science run, a little bit of overruling by the political people, right? But science is driving it. And the methods I'm talking about are essentially scientific methods of hypothesis, experimentation, feedback, and learning. Okay, so the IT methods we have are not scientific. The architecture engineering methods we have are not scientific. And I'm arguing for the scientific engineering approach. It's time to do it. If we're tired of these extremely large failure rates of IT systems in Norway and the rest of the world. Don't be shy, turn on your microphone, ask a question, or make a nasty remark, or attack me, or have fun. Let's see, I can see a selection of you. There we go. I know some of you, not others. I hope we'll get acquainted. Hope you'll feel it's worth attending on Thursday, where we'll take section 1 and do it.
I think if you stop sharing your file, you'll see even more of us.
Yeah, I've got about 2 screens full of people.
Oh yeah, you have. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I do. I've got, yeah. Anyway, it's a wonderful way of. Actually, I'll go to screen 2 and take a clip of it. Then I'll actually have a list of who's there. Okay. Although some of the ones on the first thing pop up in the second thing, like Lars and Kåre, but we have 5 more minutes if you'd like to use them.
Hi, Tom. My name is Tesfay. I'm working at FHI. This is the first time I'm attending your lesson. I have a question about, I wonder if you heard about the project Oxen in Norway?
Yes, I have. I have.
There is a lot of concern about that. Can you comment on that?
Yes, I can. Actually, I decided a couple months ago I was going to devote myself to the study of Axon. So I've collected a lot of stuff, and I was going to say I got distracted by other things, so I didn't have highest priority. I mean, nobody's asking me to do it. I'll tell you what, if you email me, I will send you at least a one-page summary of my view of Axon. Okay.
I will do that.
I'll give a little bit of history there. I discovered that all the health planning in Norway about 3-4 years ago had no clear objectives. They had a lot of unclear bullshit objectives. Okay, so that's the first thing is Axon is being driven, and it's in public, it's on the websites, by bullshit objectives. In other words, nice sounding words which are not measurable. I will send you or anybody else who asks the slides I made to show how to quantify what was early Axon goals at health. And I presented them twice to teams of about 10 people at Helsedirektoratet, okay? And both times they said, thank you very much, but we don't need this, okay?
Okay.
Now, I got so disgusted that I decided to do a desperate thing, and that was I sent a letter to Bent Høie saying, your health people don't seem to understand that you have major projects with no clear goals, and I've documented this. I will be very happy to inform you and help you get better health goals for Axon. I got a nice polite letter back from Bent Høie's young assistant of probably 25 who didn't understand what I was saying, that thank you very much, but we don't need it. Okay, so Helsedirektoratet and Axon are in denial about the fact that they won't even have a 5-minute conversation about they do not have clear goals for their architecture. Okay, so that's it, and I have documented in excruciating detail, which I'll send to you or anybody else in Norwegian, how to quantify the Axon goals. Okay. Now, if you don't have clear goals, you can't do clear planning or architecture for Axon. So I could discuss everything else like their bad architecture, but it doesn't matter. We start with clearly no clear goals. And by the way, I'm not the only person who's discovered this. I can identify a few other people in the health situation who have recognized they don't have clear goals and are trying to do something with it, but they're not very successful. They're not being listened to either. But I could identify exactly who those people are.
I've read in a lot of articles, written by Bendik Vigstad. He was just reading about these Axon projects and his concerns.
Yeah, well, I didn't catch the name.
Bendik Vigstad.
Okay.
He's a senior lecturer at University of Oslo.
I think I know him. Yeah. Could you send me a link to what you have read so I'm sure I'm updated on it?
Yeah, I will do that.
Yeah. Now, by the way, I'm retired. NAV is paying my salary every month, and they're very good at it. And I can do anything I want. And I decided a long time ago, I would love to help the health system of Norway because I'm now a client. Okay. So if anybody will listen, I will for free help them in detail do like objectives for a health system like Axon. Okay, I'm very happy to see that Christine left because she was one of the barriers of people who wouldn't listen. Okay, I found her very arrogant and was delighted to see the tale of her. But but then COVID hit and God knows what's happening with the project. But if you know anybody, including just yourself alone, who would like to listen to this with the purpose of making better health systems in Norway, I will help you for free. Now, this evening, what can I tell you, okay? Because it might make a better health system for me. I'm only 80 years old. I got another 20 years in the system, and for my family, okay? The health system isn't good enough because we have bad planning of IT systems like Axon. And I'm very concerned about it. I'm very upset about it. Let me give you the recipe in a nutshell. we need to clarify the top objectives and get them approved by FHI and Höje and people like that. It's not done. It's just bullshit objectives with nice sounding words, okay? And they don't know that, but they could be taught. Enlightened people like FHI people who are scientists, and Höje is of course not a scientist, they might turn on to the idea that clearly quantified objectives are a good idea, okay? But anyway, that's stage one page, top 10 goals approved by the authorities. That's what we want to do with the health system. Step 2 is to start a process of step-by-step, evolutionarily delivering change to the health system, not in a projected 8 years at 22 billion, but every bloody year from now on out with high priority things being delivered. I will help make that happen. I can do it. I know how to do it. I will teach anybody who will listen exactly how to do it for free. What can I tell you? But right now, Mr. Höje said, no, thank you, don't need it. I was just about to go to the health director, Björn Guldberg, when COVID hit, and I decided he's got other things to worry about. Tesfaye, you're still there, yeah.
I'm just trying not to send the link.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah. By the way, is Camilla Stoltenberg sort of your boss up the chain?
Yeah, right.
Okay,
she's the director for the institute.
I respect her. I actually met her father once. Happy to say, good people. So I would be delighted to help FHI because the health directorate is not science, but FHI is science, and maybe we need people with a scientific mentality and culture to listen to these words. I'll be delighted to help anytime. But you and I will exchange notes in the meantime.
Yeah, but it's a directory for eHealth, the one who manages this project, the Action project.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And that's Höje's game. But they're all in it together. We're all in it together. I'm a stakeholder, you're a stakeholder, Stein is a stakeholder. We all are stakeholders.
Yeah, right.
And I promise to do my bit. I mean, tonight we can start the conversation. I'm in a hurry. I've had wonderful help from the health service recently. So great people saving my life and things like that. And in the next 20 years, I think they'll probably have to save my life a few more times if I'm to live to 100 or 120, which I plan to do. Okay, that's the end of our time. The email will get you results in the meantime, and feel free to start reading the book, and welcome next time. Here's just a reminder of the book and the links for it. So we'll say goodbye to everybody, and thanks to OSWA for sponsoring this, and spread the word so we get at least 100 people filling our quota.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's very interesting. Good discussion afterwards as well. So it's nice that people joined in and asked questions. Not always people do that. So it was great. So we're going to try to do this thing twice a week until we've finished the book. So I've posted the first 3 meetups I've posted on the site. I'll continue with the other ones after a while.
Yeah, so Tesfaye, you tell your friends to join the meetup and get a little doses of the ideas, right?
Yeah, I'll try. Okay.
You're permitted to print out the book and hand it to friends or email it to people.
Yeah,
also, free.
Mm.
Okay. Have a good dinner. Have a good evening, everybody. See you on Thursday.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks.